What's a fact that sounds terrifying the more you think about it? Story 1. Brain death is irreversible. While the human body can survive temporary states of near death, example, clinical death, once the brain stops functioning for more than a few minutes, it becomes irreversibly damaged. The idea that consciousness can simply disappear without any chance of recovery is deeply unsettling when you consider the finality of it. What's even scarier is how much of our personality is determined by the brain structure. Changes in the brain, whether through injury or something else, can completely change the way we behave. Story 2. The entirety of what is you is held in a chunk of electrified fat inside a thin box of bone and hair. The entirety of what is you is a difficult concept to nail down. If you lost parts of your body, you're still you, right? But if you lost all your body and your mind was implanted into a computer or something, is that still you? Is a copy of your mind still you? If there are multiple copies, which one is you? If you were completely incinerated and ceased to exist for a time period, and then a perfect copy of you, mind and all, was made from new materials, is that still you? If you lost parts of your mind, are you still you? All your mind? Story 3. Every night, your body and consciousness just begin shutting down and you just sort of fade away for hours on end. Sure, periodically you're in there somewhere, trapped in a hallucinated world you usually don't realize or remember isn't real, no matter how absurd it is. Sometimes those hallucinations are even vivid, hyper real experiences of your deepest fears. You never know what you're going to get when you have your nightly and mandatory prolonged loss of consciousness. I think if sleep were something people didn't start doing until a certain age, we'd all be just as terrified of experiencing it for the first time as we are of death. You just stop being aware, lying somewhat vegetative and vulnerable, even temporarily paralyzed, for hours on end. Oblivious to your own existence outside of wild hallucinations that range randomly from terrifying or high stress scenarios to having to go to work to your biggest fantasies. If it weren't so familiar, it would sound like some absurd fantasy concoction that Arthur C. Clarke would dream up as an otherworldly feature of an alien species. Story 4. The fact that luck rules so much of our lives. Sure, if you have enough good luck in certain areas, life can be pretty nice, but bad luck does the opposite. And some bad luck is damn permanent, like being ugly, or poor, or getting some awful disease, or losing a limb or loved one. I've come to believe in that. You call it luck, I've called it fate. It's the utter chaos that rules reality. How there are infinitesimal factors that go into who does and who doesn't survive, who has luck and who doesn't. It's unpredictable and uncontrollable, and everyone hates that. I've learned to make peace with it. It's replaced my religion, even though there's nothing spiritual or holy about it. Your luck has more influence on you than any other factor, and all we can do is mitigate the damage. Story 5. The fact that we're surrounded by invisible microorganisms all the time is pretty unsettling. It's like our bodies host an invisible ecosystem that could turn on us at any moment. Also, as more and more research is showing that those organisms, like our gut biome, have large impacts on not only our health but behavior as well. I get a bit creeped out, wondering what is me and what is the result of the millions of tiny creatures living inside of me? Am I craving pizza for lunch? Because something living in my large intestine influenced that decision. Did I snap at my friend because there's an imbalance of creatures in my small intestine? Are any of my thoughts and desires inherently my own, or is all of me merely an internal illusion controlled by outside factors? Story 6. At some point, everybody will be dead. It is pretty weird to think that every single person who is currently alive will one day be dead, and it won't even be that long until it happens. There isn't a single person from the 1800s who's still alive. Hell, we're almost at the point where anyone born before 1910 is dead. There's currently 3 people born before 1910 who are still alive. In about 100 years from now, most of the people who are currently alive in the year 2025 will be gone. In 150 years, we'll all be gone. That's crazy to think about. Story 7. Mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, contains its own set of DNA. Without mitochondria, complex life as we know it would be impossible. Yet, for billions of years, it has evolved within eukaryotic cells, all while speaking a completely different language, essentially. It might be one of the most important symbiotic relationships in all of life, and it most likely happened as a fluke, a one-off scenario. At least, that's how I understand it. I find it fascinating to think about, Story 8, microplastics in the ocean. Millions of tons of plastic waste enter the ocean every year, breaking into microplastics that can now be found in marine life, drinking water, and even the air we breathe. There are more microplastic particles in the ocean than there are stars, scientists estimate, which means that every time you eat seafood or drink water, there's a decent chance you're ingesting tiny pieces of plastic, which can have unknown long-term health impacts on humans and ecosystems too. Story 9, how do we know what we know? Like, as individuals, how can we legitimately verify information that we are led to believe? Sure, we can look up basic information online. We know that Santiago is the capital of Chile, but what about the more esoteric and less empirical knowledge? At some point, you have to recognize that for some things, you just have to accept what other people tell you and just hope for the best that they aren't blatantly lying to your face. Way back when I was taking geometry in high school, our teacher was going through the proof for the Pythagorean theorem. I asked her how we know the axioms it's based on are true. She said, because it's obvious to any thinking person. She was so snarky. Well, when I got to college and learned about non Euclidean geometry, I was so mad. It was all about what if the axioms aren't true? Story 10, there's a procedure to surgically separate the two halves of your brain, break the connections. If you do this, your right side brain will function autonomously and without your conscious input or awareness, as if it's a completely separate individual. The right side brain in your left hand could solve a Rubik's Cube on their own, and the conscious part of you wouldn't be aware. Story 11, technology, media, advertising, food, medicine. All are now for profit and geared towards making every individual want to consume it, get or buy it, and do whatever it takes to get more money to repeat the process. This is for developed countries, but that is what is horrifying. The horrifying part is that it is the most effective form of control you can have on a population. Besides in non developed countries, whose goals are to survive and fight against oppression and slave labor, and are being turned into first world countries, people no longer need to be whipped in the back to work themselves to death. You no longer desire open land, nature, contemplation, and enjoying life. Now, all you need is media, food, alcohol, and drugs to give you dopamine highs. Then, you live in tiny, cramped apartments and work unhealthy jobs. If you make it out of the rat race, you command others to live that way. And then you own, not really, in the USA, you don't own land, your own place and whip others, so you can feed your dopamine destroyed brain. It's not even for survival, it's not even for evolution and progress. Crap. People don't even care about families anymore. It's just the undead drive to just consume and produce. Until death, then someone else continues the cycle. So, survive the third world mess and move to a Western country away from family and community to slave for those who don't care about family and community. And there are those in the comments that will refute this or talk about how being in these third world countries suck. Just remind ourselves that if you are in the privileged group, you are in the minority. And your comfort is due to keeping other people poor in other countries as well as your own. And you can't do anything about it. And if you do, you will end up poor and marginalized, and everyone, including yourself, will convince you it's your own fault. Story 12. You, whoever you are intensely irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Whatever you do just doesn't really matter to anyone but you in a varied, but always minute number of beings in an extremely narrow period of time. Worse yet, no one really knows you even now. And it's impossible anyone really will. They just have, at best, a broad understanding of what you are, tinted by their own biases. You are being designed to crave a social connection you can never truly achieve. You are truly and will always be alone. All those interactions you have are just to try and drown this true and inescapable fact. Story 13. The land around me is going to burn until at least the next 24 hours, or 48 hours, or week. Who knows? Once these flames are put out or go out, they stand a recurring chance of coming back again because this is California. We have some fires, but fire season has been amping up more and more until the apocalyptic scene we have now with 3 or 4 ongoing infernos each at 0% containment. Empty reservoirs, budgets that slash fire departments by 70 plus millions dollars in LA. And an electric grid that both can't do what it needs to and also causes devastating forest fires. Story 14, barring some catastrophic physical calamity. Example, having an anvil dropped on your head. People don't die all at once. Rather than being a matter of tick I'm alive, talk I'm dead, the brain shuts down gradually as it is deprived of its necessary function. Those TV shows where someone utters his dying breath, followed by a doctor looking up from his stethoscope stating, "I'm sorry, he's gone," is mainly for dramatic effect. I was present when both my mom and my dad died, and in both cases, it was a couple of minutes of gray area between life and death. Story 15. The fact that everyone will die is so banal. But once you start thinking about it, it becomes terrifying, and everything loses its meaning. Our ancestors, who were probably the first to realize this, must have been completely stunned. Imagine you're hunting a mammoth, and suddenly you ask yourself, what am I doing? Glick, a popular name at the time, died recently, and we'll all die, so why bother with any of this? God, back then there were no psychiatrists or antidepressants. Story 16. Of the two nuclear weapons ever dropped in war, one of them was likely dropped against direct orders. The bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki likely should not have been dropped due to adverse weather. The crews were specifically ordered to conduct a visually targeted drop rather than use any radar bombing technique. This meant they were under orders not to drop the bomb if sight of the target was obscured by clouds. On the day, Nagasaki was indeed heavily overcast, and on the first pass, the crew did not drop the weapon since they had no sight of the target. Due to a fuck up in planning, they did you have enough fuel to bring the bomb home if it wasn't dropped. After circling for a brief period, strangely a convenient hole opened in the cloud and they dropped the weapon and went home. They missed the actual target by a reasonably significant margin, with the bomb coming down on the far side of a hill from where it was meant to. It's not certain, but it seems highly likely they did not, in fact, have clear sight of the target and instead dropped the weapon using radar bombing techniques against orders. Story 17. All health, beauty, intelligence, and social grace has been teased from a vast butcher's yard of unbounded carnage, requiring incalculable eons of massacre to draw forth even the subtlest of advantages. This is not only a matter of the bloody grinding mills of selection either, but also of the innumerable mutational abominations thrown up by the madness of chance as it pursues its directionless path to some negligible, preservable trait. And then, still further, of the unavowable horrors that fitness, or sheer survival itself, predominantly entails. We are a minuscule sample of agonized matter, comprising genetic survival monsters, fished from a cosmic ocean of vile mutants, by a pitiless killing machine of infinite appetite. Story 18. The amount of trust you have to put in people your entire life. Teachers, one could be a kidnapper. Doctors, one could be trying to harvest your organs. Even your own partner could be a murderer, though the chances of running into one of these types of people is extremely rare. The chance that you could be associated with is terrifying to me. In the same vein, I'm always worried when putting my luggage in the special end of the compartment in a train. I never got anything stolen, but all the passengers leave their heavy luggages there with the assumption and trust that no one will steal it. And no one ever does, at least not that I've seen throughout Europe. Baffling, considering people can be such shits all the time. Story 19, I think it's if you put the time scale of the universe on a clock, the death of every imaginable object and atom would have happened right around 6 a.m. From henceforth is a cold eternity for which space is empty and vast. No longer will clusters form, nor will the clouds of space exist. Long have the black holes reigned, but by then even they have met their end. All before reaching sunrise. The universe will remain for eternity, a vast nothing where everything ceased to exist billions upon billions of eons ago. What we are at now is nearly the jumpstart of the universe, while also being relatively close to the end of the birth of stars. From then, it's a waiting game of hollow nothingness. This has tormented my mind since I was in high school, and now, as an adult, I can still say this makes me uneasy and somewhat unimportant in the thoughts of existence. Story 20. The Earth is due for an awful, deadly solar storm about every 150 years. The last one was 157 years ago, mainly because they didn't have the technology that we currently do, and our reliance on said technology. The idea behind a deadly solar storm is that the EMP will fry all electronics, sending us back, technology wise, to the early 1900s. Due to this, the massive transformers at power stations will not work and can't be replaced anytime soon, because they are all specialized units and pretty much different from each other, can't be rebuilt, and a replacement would take months or years, assuming that there is a country able to manufacture one with the plant online. Due to the lack of electricity, fuel will run out. The ships and trucks that bring food to stores will not be able to run. And depending, Vehicles won't run either, due to the electronics being fried, and lots of people will die off in starvation. Although you'll have a lack of potable water, which will cause people to catch related diseases, example dysentery, and die from them. Basically, imagine this current state of Puerto Rico, but globally. There wouldn't be any government to help anyone because all the people are trying to eat and drink and not get themselves killed by someone trying to take whatever meager possession that they would have. Story 21 1. Dye makers crush millions of beetles to produce red dye. 2. There exist parasites whose life cycles consist of being ingested by a live creature, then taking over its central nervous system, and forcing it to stand or reveal itself from cover so its predators can find it and eat it. Then, the parasite is itself ingested and pooped out, beginning the horrifying cycle anew. 3. Duck-billed platypus are venomous and the sting is one of the most painful in the world. 4. Pineapple contains an enzyme that digests muscle. 5. You can have genital herpes and be symptom-free for life, but it can also suddenly erupt. 6. The icon on your smartphone that measures signal is likely wildly inaccurate and misleading. 7. The natural athletic peak of your body is around 25 to 28 years of age. After that, it's downhill for most of us, except the extremely fit people that are blessed with good genes. 8. When you land from jumping on a solid surface, roughly twice your body weight in force is absorbed by your knees. Look after your knees. Story 22. Here's some of my favorites. The first thing to happen when you're burning is that your eyes will melt out of your skull. You'll be alive throughout the process and feel everything, at least for a little while. You can survive for around 4 days after being skinned alive before the resulting infection kills you. The palms are the tastiest part of a human. Daisy from the infamous Daisy's Destruction video is still alive. There are anywhere from 21 to 46 million slaves in the world right now, more than in any other point in history. After being decapitated, your head is still alive. You're fully aware of everything happening around you for around 30 to 45 seconds after, before the rapid blood loss finally shuts your brain off. I have a weird hobby, story 24. People have microplastics in their lungs and bloodstream, yay. Plastic, sorry, I couldn't help myself. It comes from a couple different sources. Back in the 50s or 60s, manufacturers of toothpaste and beauty products started adding plastic microbeads into toothpaste and skincare products as an exfoliator. Some manufacturers still do this. A lot of it comes from plastic products being dumped into oceans, lakes, and rivers. The plastic breaks down due to UV radiation from the sun, and the small bits of plastic get into small fish and other bottom feeders. The larger animals eat those, and then humans eat the larger animals. I'm also guessing human waste now contains plastic that gets dumped into our waterways, which creates a circle of life. I believe microplastic can actually get into the atmosphere and come down in rain. Basically, nowhere on Earth is safe from it, and it messes with our endocrine system and causes cancer. That's the gist of it. Someone smarter than me can probably explain it better and correct anything I said wrong. Story 25. I wouldn't say I'm horrifying, but most people actually can't read while shopping. It's like they get in the grocery store and become illiterate. Then they scream at an employee who is literally just doing their job and has no control over product availability, signage, scheduling, prices, or anything else for that matter. People are shit when they are customers. They are entitled, illiterate brats who think they should always get what they want. Story 26, that there are black holes flying around space and in a blink of an eye, we could just be swallowed by one. Similar with gamma ray outbursts from supernovas. Some are distant enough so that when they hit us, they just get absorbed by atmosphere. But one powerful enough to wipe us out could be already coming to us, and we'd have literally no way of knowing because they're as fast as light. Also in quantum mechanics, some particles can randomly appear and disappear, but it's rare and usually on a very small scale. But you, or even our whole planet, could just disappear with no reason whatsoever. We could all cease to exist any moment. But it's such a small chance that, so far, it didn't happen for billions of years. Yes, there are black holes flying around in space, but no, we would not be swallowed by one in the blink of an eye. Everything in space is flying around in the same direction, at the same time, like cars on a highway. Additionally, astronomers can actually see black holes. Even if it were the case that they were flying around in space, we would see them long before they were a threat to us. There is the potential, billions of years in the future, that our star will become one. But long before that happens, it will grow to an immense size and swallow us up. Story 27. When you hear the ding on an airplane flight, the number of dings means different things, like a stewardess is needed in the cockpit or preparing for landing. I learned from an air traffic safety engineer that 5 dings means something bad. It means all flight personnel are to come to the cockpit because the flight is in immediate danger. Now, every time I fly, and counting dings scares me when they get to 4. I don't know what each number means, I just know 5. Now, 5 is bad.